Hello, today is Friday, April 4th. Welcome to episode 435 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vigna, and I'm joined today by Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, NSI Senior Fellow Amy Mitchell, and NSI Fellow Jessica Jones. Y'all, welcome to the pod. Today is Fun Friday, although I don't know if I should necessarily characterize it like that because we are in the midst of a complete NSC, National Security Council turnover. Yesterday, we saw 2 rounds of firings of top National Security Council officials from various different directorates. These firings come after Signalgate, as well as a visit by far-right influencer Laura Loomer to the White House, where she met with President Trump, supposedly conveying to him a portfolio of, background information that she found on a number of personnel hirings by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. So this has caused quite a disturbance. We also saw last night the firing of the U.S. Cyber Command commander, as well as his deputy, were let go. And we are expecting a potential 3rd round this evening. So with that said, we're doing it live today, y'all. We were going to talk Iran, but you know what? This news was too good to pass up. So, Jess, you are just cracking up over there. So you know what? I'm calling you out first. What do you make of this?
I mean, this is exactly, we were supposed to talk about Iran. President Donald Trump said he would, it was either a deal or bomb. And you think that would be a big enough headline that would be the story for today. And lo and behold, late in the afternoon, the story shifts because the public starts to get news of all these firings, the visit by Laura Loomer. And I can't just help but sit back and, Steve Bannon kind of gave insight into the first Trump administration strategy of like flood the gates, right? Just bring out news at every end. People can't keep up. Journalists can't keep up. Just that's how you push it forward. And, I thought about that in just foreign policy, whether it comes to, we're going to get a deal in Ukraine. We're going to get the Gaza Riviera. We're going to strike the Houthis, not like the Biden administration, but better. We're going to free all the hostages. And it's like thing after thing. And we're all trying to keep up. And that strategy that seems to work in the U.S. because, we're inundated with news and we're shifting, doesn't seem to be working out as much abroad, right? And we're starting to see a little resistance. We thought tariffs were, let's see how that resettles the global economy. We just saw this morning China's doing reciprocal tariffs and there's escalation. And I keep thinking all these are coming out. We're starting to see resistance. And then I start to get a little worried because we see, we see firings NSC and head of NSA is gone. And I'm thinking that's the backbench we're supposed to look to for expertise and how we move forward on this really difficult, potential battle space. And it's getting depleted, not based off of what we see or coherent, cogent thought. It's because Laura Loomer came in, saw, we got Signalgate. We have obviously a very pissed off Trump, President Trump trying to figure out who, if anyone, he's going to fire, but also wants to stand his ground behind his, nominees that he went to the bench for. And she comes in, floods like X with these, backgrounds of these folks that need to be fired. And lo and behold, they're gone. And it's just continuing and flooding the gate. And I don't, as we move forward, I'm just sitting there like, how are we going to deal with this? Like, if President Trump is serious about his threats to Iran, who's left to actually help advise on this? Like Laura Loomer, is she going to be dictating replacements? Does she have thoughts on that? It just leaves me very concerned.
Yeah. So, Amy, do we blame Laura Loomer over this? I mean, we had Mike Waltz in the doghouse over Signalgate, right? And, Secretary of State Rubio, we've seen him, frequently boxed out of many a very serious foreign policy discussion here. Can we blame Laura Loomer, or is this just a continuation by many people in Trump's orbit to undermine Mike Waltz and Secretary Rubio to try to sort of make a flex here?
I think it's a combo of, she saw an opportunity where people had been weakened and she pounced on it. And with her very large following, There was a lot of misinformation about these people being put out. And I think part of the issue is twofold. One, she is not a foreign policy, national security expert. She is an online personality who is now taking a very active role in our dealings with allies and how the NSC functions. And the people that were quote unquote fired, let go, however we want to phrase it, this is a group of people. You might not agree with them, right? But they have dedicated their lives to these issues and were hired for that expertise. So I think we're, to your point, seeing a weakening of Mike Waltz in, a way that Trump can say, well, hey, I didn't know all this, and I I really like Mike and I've stood by him. But I think on the flip side of that, the other side, so jumbled this morning. What I am trying to say is the reverse of that is we've seen a reversal of roles between Hegseth and Waltz. And during Hegseth's confirmation, a lot of senators were kind of banking on the fact that Waltz was going to be the adult in the room and the kind of the shadow defense secretary, and that all roads would run through Waltz. And that's where they allowed their concerns about Hegseth to kind of ebb in order to get him over that finish line. And I think we've seen that Trump has a lot more confidence in Hegseth and the way he communicates. And you look back at Signalgate, Hegseth was very combative, tweeting all in caps, fake news, misinformation, yelling at reporters. And Waltz basically did not say anything. And I think that if you're going to endear yourself to the president, going with that aggressive approach is the way to go. So now, can Waltz be effective moving forward? Most likely not.
Yeah. So Les, the folks, building off of what Amy said, Les, the folks that were voted off Trump Island last night were, they are seasoned national security professionals. They are subject matter experts. They know how to do the job, and they're just incredible people. We've worked with many of them. Les, where do we go from here in terms of sort of the whole NSC and the staffing of it? What does this portend for U.S. policy moving forward?
Well, I'm not sure this is a fun Friday. It's Furlough Friday, Fired Friday. Yeah, and we're talking about super inside baseball stuff here, to be clear. The senior director level staff on National Security Council, not hugely publicly significant, but super important behind the scenes in terms of policy making, policy coordination, and getting stuff done and getting the president's agenda actually out there in the real world. And so to kind of visit this reality show drama on these folks is discordant at best and very disturbing at worst. And so our friends there who have been and these other very competent people who have been bounced for this, I think are genuinely stunned that somehow they're a pawn in this kind of crazy game. Where is Alex Jones when you need him? Surely he is out there opining on these important matters. That was a joke, folks. Trying to make a joke in a difficult situation. I think the meta. There's a whole bunch of ways to think about this, and yes, this is a fascinating episode of this particular season of the Trump as president reality show. It was a little bit surprising. It's clearly a consequence of Signalgate, but I think the larger meta issue here is that the battle is afoot between the so-called restrainers or the so-called globalists, or who's going to claim the Reaganite mantle, who can show the president that their approach to world affairs makes the most sense in his context. It's a heavy, heavy, heavy lift right now because this whole tariff structure that we've slapped on everything, which could be a tremendous mistake and hugely bad for our economy, kind of makes it hard to go explain why, the old Reagan national security approach of free markets, freedom, and that kind of thing, lower taxes, lower tariffs makes sense for this particular president. This is tough, but the battle is afoot. And that Signal chat in particular exposed that the folks like Vice President Vance, who are restrainers, who are questioning the president's judgment on the war on the Houthis, are very much at dagger points with the folks who are, let's carry out the president's agenda. And I noticed that on that chat, it was basically everyone but the vice president saying, let's go do this. Somehow now the attacks have been launched against Waltz inside, I think probably to protect the vice president because of the stuff that he said, the stuff that he wrote in that chat. But this, like, folks, for those of us who care about kind of the conservative approach to foreign policy, the battle is afoot for the next 3.5 years and where this president is going to go. And we probably, those of us who are more for American leadership in the world, need to step it up and start making the case that the president should be taking this approach and working with folks on the Hill, working with folks in the administration, trying to stitch this thing together on the terms that the president has basically set for the way he's going to conduct business, which is going to be out in public and provocative and dramatic and performative. We got to play in that space. So this is kind of an object lesson to all of us. You can't just sit back and expect good things to happen. You got to be proactive. You got to get in there and start wrestling and make your case that this is the best approach.
So if this is a Game of Thrones, though, if we take as a theory, as a posit that President Trump, is closer to Hegseth than he is to Waltz. Waltz pretend Waltz is shoved out this weekend. And it's the Hegseth worldview versus the Vance on that thread. Does that mean for, global engagement, we need Pete Hegseth to stay because he's closer than Vance? I mean, is that he needs to stay in cahoots with President Trump and kind of box out Vance?
I think it's more, first it's Sherlock.
It's more what, Amy?
Well, no, I said first it's Sherlock more than what Les is saying in the Game of Thrones world. But, Hegseth's opinions, and you saw this on the thread, right? He's a chameleon. He doesn't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. Whereas I think Vance was being very honest in his worldview and has thought a lot about this. I would say the intellectual arguments between the two are pretty vast, right? And I don't mean just thought process wise. So, he might just go for the kind of flashy Hegseth way. And if Hegseth were to move over to NSC, because that's the next question then, right? Who becomes NSC advisor?
Yeah. So Les, before I go to you, I want to jump in on this. Amy, I think you hit on an important point here, and that is Hegseth and Trump have something in common, and that is they are really good communicators, and they have a very similar style of communicating. Trump likes that, right? While Hegseth may not have any sort of policy, credibility when particularly as a commentator, he wasn't sort of this deep intellectual thinker when it came to U.S. national security. He communicates really well and he emulates Trump's bravado, right? So I think in many ways that's very appealing to Trump. Waltz, on the other hand, to his credit, he has been a very loyal follower of President Trump. President Trump helped out Waltz when he was a congressman with his district when it was hit bad during the hurricane. So Waltz has always been very, very loyal to Trump. At the same time, though, I don't think he has that kind of similar appeal that Hegseth does. Les, over to you.
I think we're missing the big opportunity here, folks. The restrainers are wrong. And that was revealed in the Signal chat. And this is, and again, I'm not necessarily saying that President Trump is the be all end all right about every single thing, but he's the president for the next 3.5 years. And he made a decision that the U.S. was going to strike back against the Houthis. The Houthis had attacked the U.S. Navy 170 times. The restrainers don't want to respond to that. They are wrong on the policy. The president knows that, and it was all exposed in the Signal chat. The real opportunity here for people who want America to engage in the world is you have a president who wants to do it under certain terms. The restrainers don't want him to. There is a policy delta here that is good for the pro-engagement community. We need to recognize that and play the game the right way and make sure that our view is the one that prevails. Because if the restrainers win, it is very bad for the United States. The president, it's in fact not actually where President Trump is. They know that, and so they're trying to cover it up with these crazy inside baseball games and making it look like people are disloyal and that kind of thing, which is a complete distraction from what's really going on, which is the actual conduct of U.S. national security policy.
So, Les, I want to follow up on that point really quickly, because as we saw in the first Trump administration, we had, I know, a lot of very senior officials like General Kelly. We had, General Mattis, Secretary Mattis. They also undermined the president in many ways when it came to his national security and defense policy. So it sounds like here we're seeing a repeat of that, but on the other side.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's exactly right, Morgan.
And
that's where we should be going and living and fighting on that ground.
Yep.
I would actually contest that General Mattis undermined the president. I think he was trying to figure out the best path forward for our allies and for our own security. And so I think I would not put the loyalty lens on the first administration that we have on this administration, on kind of Trump 2.0.
So Amy's a little biased and an apologist for Mattis. Just going to throw
Proudly,
it out there.
An honorable position. Honorable position.
I am absolutely proudly of that. And I think, his larger point, right? And he said it in his resignation letter, Les, to your point, right? This is not my belief and what I can do for you. And you need to have a secretary that can implement your policies. And so he stepped aside, right? And I think the question then becomes is, Les, to your point, does loyalty count more over rational, logical policy debates?
What I'm saying, close, Amy. What I'm saying is, does loyalty matter more than actually carrying out the president's agenda? Because what the restrainers are doing, they're not in the exact same place as the president, and they're covering up for it by engaging in these silly survivor apprentice games that are the premise for our conversation. The real issue is the actual policy, and the folks who are getting pushed out supported the policy. That's the great irony here, and we should be more aggressive in pointing that out.
Yes, I completely agree with that point.
Book recommendation for our listeners is H.R. McMaster's new book and his recount of his time in the first Trump administration. I think there will be a very sort of similar theme throughout that book, as well as
we're 2 months in.
Yeah,
we're 2 months in.
Phase 2 months into the second Trump term. So
2.5. 2.5.
Really quick, though, I do think that, just everyone's quick opinion, who would be in line to be the national security advisor?
Steve Bannon.
Alex Jones.
I no idea.
Amy, predictions, go.
Let's go to Laura Loomer's Twitter. Let's see who it'll
It's
be.
Alex Jones. It's InfoWars will be the new national security staff.
Great communicator.
If we let this happen.
Okay. Well, with that said, I am being told we got to wrap this episode up. So, it's a wrap. Thanks, Kelly. And Claude and the rest of the NSI staff for their help in producing today's very special episode. Fun, special, I don't know. Join us for another episode on Monday, April 7th for Fault Lines. And the National Security Institute's podcast crew of characters, as we will get you smart, fast on the foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our smiling faces and my fake background for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.